I never asked to be born first, but in my family, being the oldest meant becoming a third parent whether I wanted to or not. From age 12, I was changing diapers, making meals, and watching my four younger siblings while my parents went out for date nights or worked extra shifts. My mom would always tell me that this was just how families worked, that the oldest helps out. But it wasn't just helping out. By high school, I was missing sports tryouts and club meetings because I had to pick up my siblings from school. I couldn't hang out with friends on weekends because I was babysitting. My homework got done late at night after everyone else was asleep. When I finally moved out at 22, I thought I was free. I had my own small apartment, a decent job at a warehouse, and for the first time, my own things that nobody could touch or break, including my prized possession, a gaming console I had saved up for months to buy. Then the call started. They would call and tell me they needed me to watch the kids on Saturday, not ask if I could please help them or if I would be available. Just the expectation that I would drop everything and babysit. For free, of course. At first, I gave in. Old habits die hard, and the guilt trips were effective. But after a few months of lost weekends and no acknowledgement, I decided enough was enough. The breaking point came when my younger brother took my gaming console without asking and broke the controller. When I confronted my parents, they shrugged it off. My dad dismissed my concerns, saying boys will be boys and telling me to just buy another one. When I explained that the controller cost $70 and that it wasn't about the money but about respect for my things, my mom accused me of being selfish and said family shares. I reminded them that I didn't live there anymore and my belongings were in community property. My dad said as long as I was part of the family, everything was shared. Then he told me to stop complaining and help my mother with dinner because the kids needed to be fed. That night, I took my console and left. I also made a decision. No more free babysitting. For 3 peaceful months, I ignored their calls. Then one Friday evening, my phone rang. My mom told me they needed me the next day from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. I explained that I couldn't because I now worked Saturdays. She insisted that I should change my shift because my siblings needed watching. I refused and told her that if I did babysit, I'd charge $30. Plus, they would need to provide all the food. My dad grabbed the phone and angrily told me I needed to man up and help my family, boasting that he worked hard at my age. I pointed out that he had dumped all his responsibilities on me so he could work overtime, and that I was manning up by taking care of my own life now. The call devolved into shouting. I hung up after repeating my terms. Sundays only, $30 payment, and they provide all food. Plus, if anything of mine goes missing again, I'm calling the police. 2 weeks later, I'm getting ready for my Saturday shift when I hear frantic knocking at my door. It's my mom's signature knock, both hands, rapid fire, then footsteps running away. I peek through my peephole and see my 2 youngest siblings, ages 8 and 10, standing alone in the hallway looking confused. My mom is nowhere in sight. Thanks to advice from friends, I had prepared for this. I quietly went to my bedroom window, popped out the screen, and climbed out. My ground floor apartment made this easy. I called my neighbor, an older woman who knew my situation. I explained to her that my mom had just abandoned my siblings at my door and ran off, and that I wasn't home. I asked if she could please call the police, since the children were just standing in the hallway. She did. The police came and took my siblings to the station. My parents had to come pick them up and face questions about why they'd left children unattended in an apartment building. My phone exploded hours later. My mom was furious, demanding to know how I could call the police on them. I explained that I didn't. I wasn't even home since I was at work, like I'd told them. A neighbor saw 2 abandoned children and called. My mom claimed she thought I was home and asked how she was supposed to know I wasn't. I reminded her that I had told her multiple times I work Saturdays now, and that she had abandoned her children hoping to force me to miss work. I made it clear that wasn't my problem. She got off with a fine and a warning for child abandonment, but the humiliation stung worse than the money. Thanksgiving brought everything to a head. They invited me over, and like a fool, I went. As soon as I arrived, my dad laid out his new plan. He told me I was moving back home and that I would pay rent to help with their mortgage, babysit whenever they needed, and give them the family support they deserved. I simply said no. My dad stood up saying this wasn't a request. He came at me, fists clenched. But I wasn't the same kid he used to intimidate. I've been working out, taking self-defense classes. When he swung, I blocked and landed a solid punch to his stomach. He doubled over, completely shocked. I warned him that I had the whole conversation recorded and asked him to try to explain to the police why he attacked me. My dad yelled at me to get out of his house and never come back. I took a dinner roll from the table, telling him I would gladly leave, but that I had paid for this roll with all the years he stole from me. I left and blocked their numbers. My siblings still text me sometimes. The younger ones are starting to realize what I went through. The older ones already know and have started setting their own boundaries. Last week, I got a certified letter. My parents are being investigated by Child Protective Services after my 16-year-old sister reported the same parentification happening to her. They asked me to give a statement about my experience growing up. I'm meeting with a caseworker tomorrow. I've already prepared a detailed account of every responsibility that was inappropriately placed on me since I was 12. My parents made their bed by trying to make me raise their children. Now they can lie in it. I'm enrolling in community college next semester. I've got a whole life ahead of me, and for the first time, it's actually mine. I've lived on Cape Cod for about 15 years now, having moved here after retiring from the military. My Scottish heritage has always been important to me, and after years of wearing uniforms, I decided to embrace comfort and tradition by wearing kilts as my everyday attire. It started as just a weekend thing, but eventually became my signature look around town during the warmer months. Most locals know me by now, the retired guy with the salt and pepper beard who wears kilts. I've even had tourists ask to take pictures with me, which I find amusing. I've gotten used to the occasional stares, but what happened last Saturday was on a whole different level. I was doing my weekly grocery shopping at the market basket in Bourne, methodically working my way through the produce section. I was wearing my favorite dark green kilt and a comfortable beige, collarless Celtic grandfather shirt, the kind with a laced-up V-neck. Nothing flashy, just my usual weekend attire. I was examining some avocados when I heard it, that tone of voice that makes retail workers everywhere cringe. The woman called out to me with an impatient, "Excuse me." I turned around, avocado still in hand, to see a woman I'd never met before staring at me expectantly. She was probably in her 50s. I acknowledged her with a simple yes, wondering what she wanted. Without saying a word, she thrust a piece of paper toward me. I looked down and saw it was a handwritten grocery list. Confused, I handed it back to her and politely explained that I didn't work at the store. Her eyes narrowed and her lips thinned into a tight line. She accused me of lying and demanded that I do my job. Before I could respond, she snatched the list back and shoved it into the front pocket of my shirt. I stood there for a moment, honestly stunned by the audacity. I've dealt with entitled people before, but this was something else. Rather than argue with her, I learned long ago that you can't reason with unreasonable people. I slowly took the grocery list out of my shirt pocket. I made eye contact with her as I deliberately ripped it in half, and then in half again. Her eyes widened in shock as I tossed the pieces into the air, watching them flutter down like confetti. The woman became enraged. She shouted at me, saying how dare I do that, and threatened to get the manager. She screamed that I would be fired for my actions. Other shoppers stopped and stared, but I just stood there. I knew I hadn't done anything wrong, and frankly, after her behavior, I didn't feel guilty about the list. The commotion attracted the attention of the store manager, who happened to be restocking a nearby display. He hurried over, asking if everything was all right. The woman immediately complained that I, as an employee, had destroyed her shopping list and demanded that I be fired immediately. The manager looked at me, recognition dawning on his face. He'd checked me out personally several times before, and we'd chatted about Scotland once when he noticed my kilt. He told the woman that I wasn't an employee but a regular customer. The woman was confused and started to stutter, gesturing vaguely at my outfit, apparently just now processing that a kilt and Celtic shirt were not in fact the market basket uniform. The manager pointed out that their employees wear khakis and blue polo shirts with the store logo. The manager bent down and picked up the torn pieces of her grocery list. He handed them back to her with remarkable professionalism and suggested she could find tape in aisle 7 with the school supplies to put her list back together. She stood there, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. No sound came out. The manager turned to me and apologized for the incident, asking if there was anything he could help me with. I thanked him but explained I was ready to check out. The manager nodded and walked with me to the front of the store. I could feel the woman's eyes boring into my back, but I didn't look back. As the cashier rang up my groceries, the manager and I made small talk about the unseasonably warm weather we'd been having. I paid for my groceries, thanked the cashier, and headed out to the parking lot. I loaded my bags into my car and drove home, shaking my head at the absurdity of it all. When I got home, I told my wife about what happened, and she laughed so hard she had tears in her eyes. We've added the story to our collection of Cape Cod characters we've encountered over the years. And no, I haven't stopped wearing my kilts to go shopping. If anything, the incident has made me more determined than ever to stay comfortable in my own skin and my own clothes. I grew up in a small rural area about 45 minutes outside a major city. Our claim to fame was this huge flea market that attracted tons of tourists, especially during summer months. The place was absolutely packed on Tuesdays and Saturdays, with cars lined up for half a mile just waiting to get into the parking lot. When I was 14, I got my first job there selling frozen fruit bars from a cart. It was perfect for me since the flea market was exactly 1 mile from our house on the same road. I'd just hop on my bike and pedal down, passing only one intersection with a stop sign along the way. I knew every inch of that route like the back of my hand. I was always good with directions and maps. My parents joked that I was born with a compass in my head. I spent most of my free time exploring the countryside on my bike, memorizing all the back roads and shortcuts around our area. By the time I was 15, I could have drawn you a detailed map of the whole county from memory. One Tuesday morning in early September, after school had started back up, my younger sister and I were standing at the end of our driveway waiting for the school bus. We were just chatting about homework when this shiny SUV with out-of-state plates pulled up beside us. The woman in the passenger seat rolled down her window. She was wearing oversized sunglasses and had this impatient look on her face. She asked if we kids knew how to get to the flea market. I smiled, always happy to help tourists. I told her that yes, it was exactly 1 mile in the direction I was pointing. I explained she should just stay on this road, go through one stop sign, and she'd see it on the right. I assured her she couldn't miss it. The woman frowned and looked at the driver, who I assumed was her husband. She told us that they'd already been that way, and there was nothing there. I was confused because I literally worked at the place and had been there hundreds of times. I apologized but insisted it definitely was in that direction, just 1 mile down this road. I repeated that there was just one stop sign, and it was on the same road we were standing on right now. Her face suddenly turned red. She started yelling, asking if I was deaf since she'd already said they'd been that way. She accused me of lying to them. She continued shouting that they had driven up and down this stupid road twice already and there was no flea market. She demanded to know if I thought this was funny and if I was messing with tourists for my entertainment. She was screaming so loud that my sister took a step back behind me. The man driving looked embarrassed but didn't say anything. I realized there was no point arguing with her. Maybe they'd somehow missed it, though that seemed impossible since the place was huge with a massive sign. Or maybe they'd gone on a different road entirely and were completely turned around. Either way, she clearly wasn't going to believe me. I apologized for trying to mess with her and admitted she was right. Her attitude instantly changed, and she looked smug like she'd caught me in some prank. She said that's what she thought and then asked if I could give them the real directions. And that's when a little spark of mischief hit me. I put on my most sincere, helpful face. I told her of course and suggested they go in the opposite direction. I pointed away from the flea market. I instructed her to go down about 3 miles until she hit the old red barn, then take a right on Willow Creek Road. There was no red barn or Willow Creek Road in that direction. The woman started fumbling in her purse. She asked me to hold on while she wrote this down. She pulled out a small notepad and a pen while I continued with my completely fabricated directions. I told her to follow that road for about 4 miles until she saw a white church with a tall steeple. Then she should take a left there onto Mill Road. I continued explaining that after about 2 miles, she'd see a gas station. She should go right at the light and the flea market would be about a half-mile down on her left. I assured her she couldn't miss it. She wrote everything down diligently, nodding along. She thanked me and sarcastically asked if that was so hard. I replied that it wasn't at all and wished her an enjoyable time at the flea market. The man gave a little wave as they drove off, in exactly the opposite direction of where they needed to go. I felt a tiny pang of guilt knowing they'd be driving around for at least 25 minutes following non-existent landmarks, but it quickly faded when I remembered how she'd screamed at me. Just as their car disappeared around the bend, I saw our yellow school bus approaching. Perfect timing. My mom came out to the driveway, probably having heard the commotion from inside the house. She asked what that was all about. I shrugged casually and told her it was just another lost tourist looking for the flea market. I didn't tell her about the fake directions, of course. The school bus pulled up and my sister and I climbed aboard. As we settled into our seats, I couldn't help but imagine that woman and her husband driving in circles, getting more and more frustrated as they searched for landmarks that didn't exist. The flea market was closed on school days anyway. Even if they eventually found it, they'd be greeted by locked gates and empty parking lots. My husband's family seemed normal enough during our dating phase. A little loud at gatherings, but whose family isn't? What I didn't realize was that my sister-in-law had a particularly interesting personality trait. From the moment we announced my pregnancy with twins, my sister-in-law turned into a bizarre competitive monster. I'd heard of mommy competitions before, but this was on another level. It wasn't just friendly "my kid is doing well" pride. It was an obsessive need to ensure her children were superior to everyone else's in every possible category. When we found out we were having twins, I was both excited and terrified. My husband and I had been trying for almost 2 years, and suddenly we were blessed with two little miracles. The pregnancy was difficult. I was sick constantly and ended up on bed rest for the last month. But when our beautiful twin girls arrived, all the struggle seemed worth it. My sister-in-law's competitive behavior started almost immediately. When the twins were born, my sister-in-law commented on how tiny they were compared to her supposedly much larger kids. My husband tried to explain that our twins were actually a good size for multiples, but she insisted that her son was over 12 pounds at birth and that the nurses had declared him the biggest baby they'd ever seen. The thing is, I was at the hospital when her son was born. He was 8 pounds, 3 ounces, perfectly healthy, but nowhere near the supposed record-breaking weight she claimed. Over time, that weight kept increasing in her stories. By last year, she was claiming he weighed nearly 14 pounds at birth, heavier than the current heaviest recorded newborn in America. The competition intensified as the girls grew. When one of my twins rolled over at 4 months, which is pretty normal, my sister-in-law immediately bragged that her son had rolled over when he was just a week old. She claimed the pediatrician had never seen anything like it. When I pointed out that this was physically impossible for newborns, she simply insisted that her kids were just advanced. It was the same story when the twins started walking around 13 months. My sister-in-law questioned if that wasn't a bit late, claiming her daughter was already running by 4 months old. When my husband reminded her that he remembered when her daughter actually started walking around 16 months, she accused him of being mistaken and claimed to have videos of her running before 5 months. These videos mysteriously never materialized when we asked to see them. I mostly let these comments slide. They were annoying but harmless, if a bit delusional, but things took a turn when my sister-in-law decided that not only were her kids superior, but there was something wrong with mine. As the twins approached their second birthday, they were babbling constantly and had a handful of clear words each. According to our pediatrician, they were right on track developmentally. But my sister-in-law became obsessed with the idea that they weren't speaking enough. She asked if I wasn't worried that they weren't speaking in sentences yet, claiming that by 18 months, both her kids were speaking in complete 5-6 word sentences. When I explained that the twins weren't even 2 yet and that the pediatrician said they were developing normally, she suggested that doctors don't always catch these things. The irony was that her son, now almost 7, still mumbled so badly that I could barely understand a word he said. But I kept that observation to myself. My husband and I ignored her suggestions, hoping she'd drop it. Then one day, I got a call from someone who introduced herself as my sister-in-law's friend who worked in early intervention services. The specialist explained that she was calling because my sister-in-law had told her I was very concerned about my twins' speech development. After a brief discussion where she confirmed that based on what I described, my children were indeed on track developmentally, I thanked her and hung up. But I was fuming. My sister-in-law had gone behind my back to try to prove there was something wrong with my kids. That was the final straw. If her kids were such miraculous record breakers, perhaps they deserved some recognition. The next Saturday, we had dinner at my in-laws' house. The kids were playing in another room, and all the adults were gathered around the dining table. I told my sister-in-law I had something for her, explaining that since her kids had broken so many developmental records, I thought they deserved proper recognition. I handed her a professionally printed and laminated booklet titled The White Claw Book of World Records. Inside, I compiled every supposed milestone her children had achieved, complete with photos and information about the actual world record holders who had now been pushed to second place. My sister-in-law flipped through the first couple of pages, her face growing redder with each turn. Finally, she slammed it shut and called me a jerk. She shoved the booklet toward her husband, who picked it up curiously. After reading the first page, he burst into laughter and asked her why she was still lying about these things, mentioning they had talked about this many times before. My sister-in-law stormed out of the house without another word. The rest of the dinner was awkwardly quiet, but I noticed my father-in-law trying to hide his smile. Later that night, I received a text from her where she couldn't believe that I would humiliate her in front of everyone. She claimed all she ever tried to do was help me get my kids the help they obviously needed. But if that was how I wanted to treat her, she would stop trying to help. I simply responded with a thank you. It's been 2 weeks, and she hasn't mentioned my children's development once.